The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Yes, welcome everybody. Welcome to All You Can Eat. This is Robert Rosenthal, your host, coming to you live. This is episode number 9, coming to you live from New York City. New York City, New York, in the midst of what I would call an existential struggle between summer and winter that we call spring here. The day opens up, it's kind of cold and breezy, and then later the sun shines and you just bask in the warmth of it. But that's what you get when you're living on the East Coast here. You get 4 seasons, and early spring is about that. Anyway, a lovely day. Glad to be here with you live. I'm particularly excited this evening because I have a guest who I'm going to introduce officially or shortly. But the headline of the story is that he is he's a food guy. He's an expert, in fact, and he's an expert in what is easily the most diverse city in America and arguably the entire world. I'm going to tell you about that. It's Queens, and his name is Joe DiStefano. We're going to introduce him in a couple of minutes. And I guess part of the reason, in fact, I know Joe, and I like Joe, and I admire his work, and tell you a lot about him. But part of the reason that makes this particularly kind of relevant and exciting for me is I know Queens. I know it because I spent the first 8 years of my life growing up there. Part of Queens that's called Kew Gardens, which borders Forest Hills. Went to public school, PS 99. This, I tell you with some mixed emotion, is the very same school which graduated Jerry Springer. We have that in common. I don't need to remind people that our President of the United States, also from Queens, we have that in common. I don't do politics at all on this show, but I will say that may be all that we have in common. And I would also throw out at you, not inconsequentially, that my very own mother worked at the World's Fair. In 1964, the World's Fair took place in Queens, so I was around. I lived maybe 2 miles, 3 miles away from it, so I went over there. And it's relevant to today's conversation with Joe. I would also point out to you that, when people say, like, where'd you grow up? I grew up in Queens. I might have gotten out of there when I was 8, but I think it's important to understand that your personality is pretty much formed by the time you're 7 years old. And this is not just my perspective, my point of view. You can look at studies up and down the wazoo. Personalities stay pretty much the same throughout our lives, from early childhood years to after we're over the hill, according to studies. The results show personality traits observed in children as young as first graders are a strong predictor of adult behavior. We remain recognizably the same person, says a PhD at UC, University of California. Child can have fairly developed personality, or at least personality tendency, by 7 years old, or even earlier than that. And behavioral styles at age 3 are linked to adult personality traits at age 26. So where you come from, where you grow up, especially the early years, has an impact. Again, it's a parental thing, it's an environmental thing, it's a nature thing. All of that is involved. But I would say that as a food guy, and I'm going to talk to Joe about this as well, so much of what we experience in our youth, especially when it comes to foods, the sense of smell is the strongest sense and has the longest memory. Let's put it that way. So much of what of what we become later on, and especially what we enjoy, or our relationship with food started really super early, right? So this is relevant to me in a lot of ways. I walked to PS 99, by the way, and in first grade, they let us, on Fridays, they let us leave school for lunch. Now, I don't know that they do that now or that they don't. It's not the point. The point is that when I was 7 years old in first grade, on Fridays, what we looked forward to was leaving school. You didn't have to be attended by anybody. You basically walked to the pizza place, which was about 2 blocks down Lefferts Boulevard. And the pizza place was the House of Danny, D-A-N-I. And the thing that's amazing about the House of Danny is that it literally is, it's a corner, like the building is a corner, like it's tucked into the corner. The freaking pizza place is shaped like a slice of pizza. And the House of Danny is no like, hey, that's the pizza place where I grew up, and that's what it would. No, the House of Danny is still there today. It was there it's still there today, still run by the same family, still owned and managed by the same family. And I mentioned the pizza thing because after having eaten around the world, people say, like, what's your favorite food? There's no question in my mind. It's always going to be pizza. And a lot of that is built on that whole first experience that I had with Danny's Pizza back in first grade. And you would walk there on Fridays. I don't remember if I had 1 slice or 2, because when you're in first grade, I don't even know if I was capable of 2, although I could eat. But in any case, I do remember lunch was 50 cents, and that included the beverage, which was either grape drink or orange drink, served in a paper cup that had been placed inside a cylindrical metal tin. Anyway, I have vivid memories. Like, to me, the smell of pizza is still kind of a turn-on for me. Danny's House of Pizza, Sweetest Sauce in Kew Gardens, 1959, still family-owned and run, Lefferts Boulevard. I'll tell you another thing from my Queens childhood, food-related. My grandfather was a butcher in the Bronx. Every single Friday of my life, he would show up, I believe it was on Friday night, with a box that he brought from his shop in the Bronx. And the box was filled with meat. So there was steak, there was chicken. When you were lucky, there was some lamb chops. That was everybody's favorite. There was liver in there, too. And I don't even mean, like, I saw chicken livers, but I remember more like the whole thing, like the calf's liver, like a giant piece of liver. And then he brought what they called chopped meat in brown butcher paper. And when he came over on Thursdays, and I could be 2, the first thing that happened was that we opened up the brown butcher paper with the chopped meat in it. And the chopped meat is literally, it's chopped steak. It's just raw chopped steak. And we dipped 2 fingers in and took a little scoop of the chopped meat, put a little salt on it, and ate it just like that. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I was 2. All I knew was that I loved it. The texture, the beefiness, the taste, the sweet, like everything about it was good. I had no idea I was eating what they would go on to call, steak tartare, but I liked it. So, yeah, I have super strong and fond memories of Queens. Now, in those days, incidentally, it wasn't. There wasn't an enormous diversity. I mean, you kind of knew that if you went to Astoria, there was a big Greek community. And then maybe it was another 10 or 20 years later that you would go back and there was a huge Spanish community. But Queens has become the most, and I quote, the most ethnically diverse urban area in the world. Right? And this is not just my talking. Let me throw a little stats at you, okay? First of all, Queens, and by the way, this actually even surprised me because we kind of always knew how big Brooklyn was, but Queens is the 4th most densely populated county in the United States. So if you looked at Queens as kind of an independent city, it would be the nation's 4th most populous city after Los Angeles, Chicago, and Brooklyn. It's the most ethnically diverse urban area in the world. You basically have, I don't know, 2.5, 3. What you got, and half of the people there are immigrants. No racial or ethnic group holds a majority, a 50% majority in the borough. And according to the World Economic Forum, there's 160 languages spoken in the borough. So they call it the capital of linguistic diversity, not just for the 5 boroughs, but for the human species, is Queens. So when we're talking about Queens, it's not only that you have diversity in terms of language, in terms of culture, but by definition, you have diversity in terms of food. And I'm going to, the truth is, for me, I happen to live in the Manhattan part of New York City, where obviously we have access to a lot of good restaurants. But when I start thinking of Queens, it's actually a little intimidating because it's enormous, it's vast, and the choices now are unbelievable, and it's Greek and Indonesian and Filipino and Lithuanian and Russian, Cantonese, Taiwanese, Sichuanese, Tibetan, Ecuadorian, Mexican. It goes on and on and on. Now, that is a perfect segue into our guest today, who is, and I'm saying this because if I went to Queens, I would need a guide. I just want to say that. I mean, it's intimidating to me because there's so much going on down there. Our guest today, ladies and gentlemen, is the Queens-based food writer, culinary tour guide, and consultant Joe DiStefano. And this Joe has been exploring the borough's diverse global food scene. I'm going to say 20 years, but I'm going to check in with you, Joe, in a second. He's the founder of the Queens-centric food blog. It's called Chopsticks and Marrow, so you can always take a look at Chopsticks and Marrow and see what Joe is writing about the food of Queens. And more kind of currently, I gotta say, it's super impressive, Joe. He's the author of the best-selling guidebook, 100 Places in Queens That You Must Not Miss. And I say best-selling, no joke, in its second printing already. 111 Places in Queens That You Must Not Miss. We're going to talk about the book. And by the way, not every one of those 111 places are food. In fact, they're not really. We'll talk about that. But he is, ladies and gentlemen, the enabler of gluttons. He is the guy who ate Queens. Ladies, say hello to our guest, Joe DiStefano. How you doing, Joe?
Hey, how are you, Rob? How's everybody doing? Coming to you live from the capital of linguistic diversity.
Yes.
And of course, international cuisine, Queens, New York City. Thanks for having me on. I
am glad to have you, and I'm excited because, well, you know why, because I already explained why. And I thought what we would do today, Joe, is talk first about you, then let's talk about the food from Queens, and then we can speak about some of the other stuff like the book and the event that's upcoming. But
sure,
tell people kind of like, so you heard my whole food experience. Your father was influential in your move into the food thing. How did the whole thing come about for you?
Yeah, so what's interesting is my story is a little bit like yours in reverse. So I was born in Queens, in Queens Village, and when I was quite young, we moved to Long Island.
Right.
And I didn't have any experience with Queens. I've been back in Queens since about 1998. But to get back to my childhood, I grew up in a house where we all loved to eat. Italian American. My father loved to eat, and certainly Sunday gravy, that sort of thing. 7 fishes on Christmas Eve, but more importantly, what really informed my culinary consciousness, much the way that pizza was so important to you, was that we would go to Manhattan's Chinatown probably once or twice a month.
Right.
And I think my pop started going there because I think his union was near there. But anyway, he kind of knew what he liked, and we would go to Wohop, and I have very early memories of him going to the factory where they made wonton skins, and he wasn't making wontons, he wanted to make his own chow fun noodles.
Nice.
And I guess, presumably you could buy the noodles, I don't know, but somehow he figured this was a good way to do it.
Right.
Basically you cut the square into I don't know, 4 lengths, and all I remember was pretty sure the factory's still there on this would be the western side of Monmouth Canal, and all I remember was that there was like flour everywhere.
Right.
People dressed in white, and my mother, for her part, would we went to Wohop a lot, but my mother would try to, and to great effect, she would reproduce their sweet and sour pork.
Nice. I'm laughing because in my family, they would attempt to make Chinese food, my grandmother and my aunt, but they called it funny. Like, you know how you and I know that it's called, like, chow mein? Well, in our family, for some reason, it was charmaine, and it didn't taste like the same stuff in the Chinese restaurant, I will tell you that. But the Wohop, by the way, just like Danny's House of Pizza, Wohop is still in business.
Wohop is still in business. It's great, and I still get over there every now and then.
That's funny. So,
but you know, so the charmaine didn't taste like chow mein, you know.
No.
One year, someone got my father the Craig Claiborne Chinese cookbook, and he was making something with black beans, and I think he thought that if you put more, it would be better, and it's a salted product,
Right.
and we couldn't eat it.
Yeah, no, I get the picture. Yeah, inedible. That's pretty funny. Hey, I meant to ask you this. So anyway, no, let's stay on the theme, because did your mom is cooking at home, but it sounds like she's making kind of the typical kind of like Italian-ish, you know, dishes. Was she a good cook?
She was a good cook, and she was a pretty good baker as well.
Got it.
So apple pie, the Gina cookies with the sesames, Hannah's toast. You know, both my parents were pretty good home cooks. Although my father's domain was the Sunday gravy.
Yeah, and so at some point, Joe, you go back to Queens. This becomes something that becomes not only your passion, but your living.
Yes.
Talk about that. How did that come to be?
Yeah. So in 1998, my girlfriend and my girlfriend at the time and her mother kicked me out of their house in Princess Bay. It's called Queens. Sort of like the Odd Couple.
Right.
I wound up in Queens, and at the time I lived in Woodside, which was, if you know the 7 line at all, it's 52nd and Woodside Avenue. But there's a big hub at 74th Street and Roosevelt, which is more or less a straight shot. And I would walk those 20 blocks every evening, and I would explore a different cuisine. One night it might be Thai, might be Filipino, might be Mexican, and so forth. On my walk home, you know, I would stop someplace for dinner, and by extension, I would explore the cultures, because really, you know, in Queens, when you go to eat Thai food, for the most part, you're eating with Thai people who live, work, and play in the neighborhood, and sometimes worship in the neighborhood.
Right. What time frame are we talking about? What year are we in?
This is probably call it 98, 99.
Right. I mean, so basically, we're looking at you know, if we say 98, you're basically looking at 20 years. You've been taking in the food from this part of the world. Now, in the early days, you're still having, you know, Thai. You're having Filipino. How much has it changed since then in terms of what's available to you, or to all of us?
Well, so let's take the example of something that really wasn't available at all when I first moved to Queens. So when I first moved to Queens, there was no typical or Nepali food.
Right.
Now, Jackson Heights, which many listeners and you may think of, many people think of Jackson Heights as Indian.
Right.
And it was Indian then, and it's still very Indian. You know, you can go buy Indian bridal jewelry. You can buy a sari. There's the Jackson Diner is still there. Back when I first started exploring the neighborhood, it literally was a diner. But in the past 10 years, Tibetan and Nepalese food has become so prevalent in that neighborhood that I like to call it Himalayan Heights.
Right. And I think, well, I think that what kind of characterizes what you do, and you can clarify, is that you're not just eating the food or taking people to eat the food. You're taking them to experience the culture through the food. So the cultural aspect of it is important.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. You might be blind to it if you just go eat there by yourself.
Right.
But it's just steeped in it. You know, it's just to what extent do you realize it? You know, if you go to if you go to a Tibetan restaurant in Jackson Heights, the Dalai Lama's up there somewhere, surrounded by a prayer scarf.
Right.
You might even see a monk while you're dining there. There's a Thai noodle shop that's sort of a pop-up in a bar that I happen to love.
Right.
And on, I think it's the first Sunday of the month, they're not popping up because they're at the Thai temple in Corona cooking food for free.
Right.
So the culture and the cuisine are just completely intertwined.
And when you take people, you know, what's it like when you take? Do you custom, like, how does the tour thing work? Like, what do you take people to see in general, or more specifically? Is it a certain type? Do you customize it? Do you go to the temple? Like, what's the tour with you like through Queens?
Okay, so I break it down by neighborhood.
Okay. So
by far the most popular tour I give is of what I like to call America's greatest Chinatown, downtown Flushing.
Gotcha.
And which is no coincidence, given that my love affair of food started with Chinese. But
right.
The neighborhood is great because it's so much more like Queens itself. It's very diverse. So over the course of about 3.5 hours, we experience a whole bunch of regional Chinese cuisine, starting with Cantonese, and then sort of moving on to Western Chinese. And, you know, really for the most part, we're eating in a lot of food courts and hawker centers, and the tour is pretty standard. You know, these are all places that I think are sort of best in class for everything they're providing. And, you know, a lot of them are places that you wouldn't necessarily know about, like Soybean Chen, which sells wonderful fresh tofu out of a cart tucked inside of a florist that they own.
Wow.
So you walk by Soybean Chen Flower Shop and you wouldn't necessarily know was there. And, you know,
hey, we lost Joe here because for some reason, I don't know why he's on hold, but, there you go. You're back? I would say you might have hit a button by mistake, but I think you're back on now.
Yep. You can hear me?
I can now. You might have hit a button, but yeah, you were talking about the place behind the flower shop.
Yeah, it's right in the front. You know, it's called Soybean Chen for a reason, because they sell tofu.
Right.
And, you might think that we're eating for all of the 3.5 hours, but what we do is we sort of hit a bunch of places in, I don't want to say rapid succession, but I have it very dialed in. So in the middle of it, we take a walk to India. We both mentioned temples, so we walk to the Ganesh temple
Right.
of the Hindu Temple Society of North America, and then usually we loop back to China. Sometimes we'll go to Dumpling Galaxy, which is a wonderful restaurant started by Helen Yu, who started out in the neighborhood's oldest food court, the Golden Shopping Mall. And in terms of customization, I feel people out. So while this isn't the Andrew Zimmern tour, but like our second stop is in a supermarket, and we go look at the durian. And if people express an interest in durian, we go to a place called Sea Fruit Life, and we partake of some durian pizza. And downtown Flushing, as far as I know, is the only place where you can get durian pizza. And it's quite interesting.
It's so just for people who don't know, durian is what they say one of the most the stinkiest, one of the foulest smelling, fruits in the world, and yet there's something luxurious about the eating of it. And you're saying that you will eat durian on a pizza, if I have that right?
Yeah, it's so there's the dough is the base. Then there's a schmear, if you will, of durian, and the cheese is on top.
How is it? How's it taste?
It's good. It kind of it has a little bit of a caramelized onion kind of thing going on, which works really well
On pizza
with as a pizza. I took some Italian clients there. These folks who run an Enoteca in Emilia Romagna, and they had it. And they said, "Oh, this is really good." I said, "You don't have to be polite."
Right.
And I said, "No, this is actually good. We're okay with strong flavors." And so, Rob, in terms of the other tours I give, I was talking about. I think I mentioned Thai food. So in Queens, we're fortunate to have two Chinatowns. The second one is Elmhurst, which is. It's still very much a Chinatown, but these days it's the best place for Southeast Asian food. So Thai food, Indonesian food, just phenomenal. And then I do a tour of Jackson Heights as well. I do the entire 7 Line.
I'm starting to get hungry, and you reminded me of a couple of things, Joe. One is the Dumpling Galaxy is the place that you took me.
Yes, that's right.
And what I want to say about it, and I know you know this, is that when I reviewed the meals that I had in 2017, the standout for me, Chinese experience was there with you at Dumpling Galaxy. So much so that I remember now that we had an off-the-menu dumpling that was filled with a soup dumpling that was filled with lamb.
Yes, we did.
And we also had some crispy pork ribs, and those also were kind of unforgettable. There are certain.
I don't get those often enough. I've got a big tour on Saturday for someone's birthday, and I might get those for them.
Yeah, Joe, I'll tell you what the thing about it is. Like, you kind of can't go wrong with pork ribs, but when you kind of fry them, which I assume she did to make them crispy, and then you serve them with whatever kind of like soy, scallion-y, maybe there was some peanuts involved in, peanuts. That's just some fine eating. You just can, it just can't be bad. It's just a beautiful thing. The other thing that you mentioned that resonated with me is you mentioned the name of Andrew Zimmern, who most people, who know, travels around the world and has 1,000 shows on the Travel Channel. You had some. He kind of came to. I think he's a Brooklyn guy, but you had some interaction with him at some point, did you not?
Well, ultimately, I was fortunate enough to curate the Queen's episode of Bizarre Foods America.
Beautiful. Good.
Which, entailed me working with the production company and being on air and hanging out with Andrew for the day, or a couple of days in the crew, and that was a lot of fun. But the way that all came about was that Shan Famous Foods, which is sort of a pretty safe to say it's the first ever regional Chinese mini chain, probably in the entire U.S., but we'll say to come out of Flushing, Queens. Started out in a little hawker center. Anyway, they had expanded to Manhattan, and they put out a call on social media. They said, "Hey, Andrew Zimmerman's going to be filming, our Chinatown location. Come by if you want to meet him." They're trying to generate buzz, and so I went. And I started stalking him after that. Now, I just followed him on Twitter, and I would contact him. And one day I emailed him and said, "So, hey man, when are you coming to Queens?" He said, "I'm coming to Queens. I'll let you know.
Right.
We'll be in touch." And so that's sort of my, how I met AZ.
And what do you think? How did you find him?
I thought he was a lovely, lovely man.
Yeah.
At the very beginning of it, he just said to me, "Hey man, this is real easy. We're just two guys geeking out about food."
Yeah, exactly. And
the really, like, the only direction he gave me was we walked into a place and I said something like, "Here we are walking in, and there's the counter." He's like, "Stop! You don't have to say anything to that. All these people will see that. Just go right into what the place is about."
Well, speaking about what the place is about, let's talk some specifics. Let's talk food, because I think it's 8:35 and I'm starting to get a little peckish. And so as a point of reference, Joe, I'm on the Chopsticks and Marrow, your site. Chopsticks and Marrow, ladies and gentlemen. It's Chopsticks and A-N-D, Marrow, MARROW.com, where Joe collects his thoughts and writings about food. And I happen to be on the post from Feb 14, our favorite foods in 111 places in Queens that you must not miss. So before we even talk about the book, which we're going to get to, let me ask you about some of the foods that you...
Please do.
All right, so number one, you talked about a durian pizza before, which is interesting, but not as interesting to me as the falafel slice at Benji's Kosher Pizza Dairy Restaurant and Sushi Bar. Tell me about that one.
It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a sliced pizza with falafel balls on top, and it's one of these things where as a food writer who likes to try new and sometimes strange things, it's the kind of thing, you see it and you do a double take. Say, what is that? Are those meatballs?
Right.
Or, I may have said to the guy, is that what I think it is? And so basically, it's a mashup of Israeli and Italian-American street food, and it works.
Yeah. I'm looking at it. It looks good, and I guess it's because I'm hungry, but I mean, you know what? Joe, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a purist, and yet that doesn't mean I wouldn't enjoy a nice slice with falafel on it, which is...
You know what? I am too, but I'm able to judge things on their merits.
Yes, I totally agree.
But I will say, falafel might work on top of a pizza, but I wouldn't pour Italian gravy into a falafel sandwich or necessarily put mozzarella on it. I could not agree with you more, and I think that's a very good point. But the overall kind of thing here is that, that particular combination of food, pizza, Italian, at Benji's Kosher Restaurant with falafel balls, which, will forever be an argument over what part of the Middle East discovered them, is a classic kind of New York mashup. That's a beautiful thing. Absolutely.
Let me skip here over to Tibetan food, and the reason is because you have lots of fast food on the list. And if somebody said to me, and I haven't been to Tibet, but I've eaten at 3,000 restaurants on 6 continents, like, tell me about Tibetan food, I wouldn't even know where to begin. So lots of fast food. Talk to us about what a person is going to eat there at a Tibetan restaurant tucked behind a cell phone store.
Okay, so there's a picture which you and I see and the listeners don't, and the picture really kind of says it all. So by far the most popular Tibetan dish, the hamburger of the Himalayas, if you will, is the momo dumpling.
Got it.
So basically, it's sort of they're sort of pleated and twisted on the top like a soup dumpling, a little thicker, probably a lot thicker. It's a beef dumpling and seasoned with a momo masala that has a little bit of Szechuan peppercorn, garlic, onion, some other goodies, and so that's a very typical thing, and people make different kinds. So at lots of fast food, which, despite the name, is not, the momo do not come out fast.
Right.
They're typically made fresh. So they do a variety called the chutse momo, where they'll put they fill them with chive. Those are quite nice. I like the chive and beef. One of the other common things is a hand-torn noodle soup called tentok, where they'll tear little pieces of dough, so each one is sort of, a little bigger than a postage stamp, sort of irregular handmade noodles that go into this wonderful beef soup. And, it's just, real hearty stuff. And then there's a couple of parallels with sort of Szechuan food, so like mung bean jelly and like spicy vinegar and garlic, a wonderful cold dish. Things of that nature, some other spicy stir-fried noodle dishes.
Joe, you said mung bean jelly, am I right?
Yes.
So I'm an open, there's very few things that I won't eat, and I'll eat mung bean jelly. Don't misunderstand where I'm going with this.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain foods that people won't eat, I believe, simply because of the way that they sound. And one of those foods for me would be like mung bean jelly. I mean, seriously, it's like, it may be the greatest thing in the world, but if you came to me and you go, I think, Rob, we should go out and get some mung bean jelly, I wouldn't be like, no, Joe, you know what? Why don't we go for that falafel? Let's go for the falafel
Rob,
pizza,
Would you like, Rob, would you like to try these really awesome spicy cold noodles?
Yeah, exactly. Are there foods, by the way, before we go back to this list, because you got some great stuff, are there foods that you won't eat? Or you don't eat?
Yeah, well, there's one.
What is it?
There's one, and it's Korean fermented skate.
Oh, because that stuff it's got to stink.
It's the Korean equivalent of whatever that Icelandic shark is.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. It's the worst stenchful food in the world. By the way,
it smells like a well-used litter box.
Do you? Again, I'm skipping around here because I want to go back to this, but you mentioned Korean, and I have a super love affair for the last year or two, for Korean food. Are you? And I got Koreatown here, so I got a lot in the neighborhood. What's the Korean situation? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Flushing. What's the Korean situation out by you? Where do you go? What do you eat?
So Manhattan might have that sort of abbreviated Koreatown.
Yeah, and
it's a good introduction, but because it's sort of small, it has to be all things to all people. So the menu at each place is like an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
The situation in Flushing is that there's a vast K-tropolis that runs along Northern Boulevard from about Northern and Union all the way almost out to Manhasset. And so there are restaurants that sort of specialize in, like, hey, all we make is porridge.
Interesting.
All we do is Korean sushi, or we're a barbecue place, but really our specialty is pork belly.
Right.
Or there's hundreds of restaurants on Northern Boulevard.
Right.
I've probably been to 10.
Yeah, I'm huge on Korean. I love what they do. I'm influenced. I think no, I don't want to say I'm influenced. I enjoy the soju. That's a different story. But I mean, I think to go out for a place where they're doing a barbecue of marinated beef at your table over wood burning embers.
Oh, I think it's great.
It's just I just love the hell out of it. So I'm big on the Korean thing, and I'm glad to hear that. That's
it's one of my favorite ways to eat too, because all the veg you get with the banchan and stuff is just amazing.
A ton. And for people who are not familiar with that, let's explain that banchan is like 10 plates worth of basically marinated, pickled, kimchi type, vegetables, carrots, and sprouts and whatever that come with it, and it's I love the Korean dining experience an awful lot. Going back to your list, let's jump over to Artopolis in the strip mall in Astoria. What's going on over there?
Oh, Artopolis is great. I mean, it's If you could imagine like the best Italian pastry shop you've been to, but it's Greek.
Right.
So, there's there's olive bread, there's baklava, to be sure, not one kind of baklava, but more than half a dozen types of baklava. And, then there's a lot of traditional Greek cookies like these korambietes, which is a butter cookie made with almonds and Greek brandy that are served at christenings. Actually, we served them at my book launch to celebrate the christening of the book.
Sweet. Back to Main Street in Flushing, because I actually am a big fan of chestnuts.
Yes.
You talk about the Chestnut King. What's going on over there?
So this is there are a few vendors along Main Street that serve Chinese-style roast chestnuts, and this guy's the original. What makes it unique is that it's a different variety of chestnut. It's slightly smaller than the big honking guys you get come Christmas time around Rockefeller Center, so a little smaller and sweeter, and there's an interesting way that they're cooked. They're cooked in sort of there's a gas flame, and above it is a bowl where little pebbles are agitated and mixed around with the uncut chestnuts, so they cook in the shell.
Right.
And then when you get them, you crack them open, and that's it. And it's great. Usually they tend to shut down when the warmer weather comes, but he buys a couple of tons of chestnuts every year to take them through the winter.
Graveyard Shift Laksa, curry leaves.
That's the name of my new band. No, Graveyard Shift Laksa is so Curry Leaves is a Malaysian restaurant, and as such, it serves Malaysian food throughout the day. However, the people who own it are maximizing their rent by hosting the longest-running late-night Malaysian pop-up in New York City history. So basically,
that's good.
If you go there at 4 a.m., it's a different restaurant.
Oh, interesting.
They serve Malaysian food, but you go and you walk up to the counter. You don't sit at the table,
right? And
they say, "What kind of broth you want?" You say, "Oh, I want curry broth." "What kind of noodle you want?" "I want yellow noodle." And I say, "What do you want in it?" And there's a whole bunch of fish balls and little things that you can get put in.
Right.
So I want char siu pork. I want the eggplant stuffed with fish cake. Give me the fried wontons, and you load the whole thing up. I like to go right before dawn. That way, when I leave, the sun is coming up.
And you're talking about dropping $10, I guess, on this kind of thing.
Something like that, yeah. I've never spent more than 10, maybe $12 for the coffee and a dessert.
God bless. Finally, from this list, before we move into some of the other things that you've been eating, because I've noticed them on your site, tell people about the pelmeni at the Forest Hills Spa, please, Joe.
Sure. So, the Forest Hills Spa, first of all, is an authentic Russian banya or bathhouse in Queens, and it does serve spa cuisine like juices and whatever. But one of the best things they serve are these fried pelmeni, and pelmeni is sort of like it's a Russian dumpling. You could compare it to a tortellini, and the fried ones are absolutely glorious. Basically, it's a veal dumpling that's fried to really golden crispiness and served with sour cream and butter.
Yeah,
so you eat that, then you go sweat for 6 hours, and you feel better about it.
I just out of curiosity, is there vodka served as well, or is that not part of this thing?
I think they sell beer, but not vodka.
Okay, all right. Look, I just me, I'm always looking for the next party. But pelmeni, sure, maybe not spa food, but I would. So what? You go to the Russian bath. This is one of these places where you sweat like a pig, and they're spanking you with like branches.
I have gotten that treatment.
And then I would go afterwards, have a nice cold beer and some pelmeni veal dumplings, and go, you know what? That's a good afternoon or a night or whatever it is.
It's a great way to spend the Saturday.
And then from there, Joe, because you got me kind of thinking about this kind of thing, I may just spend all day, floating around Flushing, moving from Chinese to Korean, maybe a little Tibetan, and then at like 4 a.m. eventually make my way to the graveyard shift. Hey, let's talk about some of the other things you've been eating recently. What's up with did you say goodbye recently to a cumin-encrusted Muslim lamb chop? Because tell people about the Muslim lamb chop, and am I mistaken that there was something in something that you wrote that made it like kind of final? Is there a what should we know?
So the Muslim lamb chop is this sort of it's a breast of lamb that's been marinated, braised, and then they deep fry it. And after they deep fry it, they roll it in cumin, black and white sesame, red pepper flakes, and salt.
Yeah, it's got to be amazing.
Done properly, it's absolutely stupendous.
Right.
And there's a restaurant that popularized it that I used to love. And what happens in restaurants, sometimes they want to get stuff out the door. And what they were doing was cooking this in advance. And when you order it, they were just chucking it under the broiler. Right. So it's not the same as
it's not.
fresh.
It's not the same. And
so there was a gentleman who ran a stall called Peng Shun in the New York food court that made the best version of this in downtown Flushing. And for, I don't know, maybe 2 years or however long he was open for, I would make it my business to take all of my tour clients there. And it's just an amazing showstopper of a dish. And about 2 weeks ago, he was gone.
Oh.
And I'm told he went back to China, and I'm very sad, and the quest for the best Muslim lamb chop in Queens begins again.
Hey, do me a favor, when you discover it, let me know. I'll come out and share one with you, because it just...
Absolutely. He had a good run. He was around for 3 years. I'm looking at this. He was around, almost around this time. April 24th, 2015 was the first time I wrote about it.
Hey, Joe, we have limited time. I want to make sure that we don't miss a couple of things. I would love to. We may come back to this if we have the time. But you've been to Leo's Latticini recently?
I love Leo's Latticini.
What do we?
I'm there all the time.
All the time. What's the go-to over there?
Well, it depends, but I like the Mama Special with the Cold-cut sandwich with the fresh mozzarella. and marinated mushrooms. But you know what? The roast pork with gravy is a good sandwich too.
Yeah, that'd be my choice.
You know, on Friday they do pasta and gravy with shellfish and fish, so that's nice too.
Ooh, that would be really good. And real quick, like before we talk about the World's Fair event coming up and your book, how was your chicken bolognese grilled cheese?
It was a nice sandwich, and I was in a rut. It's hard to find a good sandwich to write about every Wednesday.
Wow,
It's a nice sandwich. Basically, it's a really well-made chicken bolognese on nice toasty bread with mozzarella that this guy's making with curds he gets in Astoria.
Can't argue with that, man. That's
No, you cannot. You can try, but
yeah. So here's the thing: because we're at April 18th right now, I'm not here this coming weekend. I'm out of town. But if I were here, World's Fair is April 28th and 29th. I've lost track of the time schedule. Tell people about the World's Fair event coming up on April 28th and 29th, to which you are also a curator, a contributing curator.
Sure. So the World's Fair is a festival of international cuisine and culture, patterned in some ways after the 1964-65 World's Fair.
Nice.
With food from about 100 countries, and I'm really, really very excited to be working with my good friend Josh Schneps of Schneps Communications, and particularly excited to be working with KFcito, who is the king of Asian street food. He's I think KF is from Singapore, if I'm correct.
Yeah, he is Singapore.
But I'm so excited to have brought in a few of my very favorite restaurants to the festival, including Morani Kosher Georgian Cuisine, the Arepa Lady,
nice.
The Malaysian Project, Papa Rich Malaysian, Dumpling Galaxy, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Where do people go to get info and tickets? What's the it's the worldsfair.nyc. World's Fair is FARE.
Yeah, people can go to the worldsfair.nyc. It's going to be at Citi Field, and look for me on Saturday. I'll be there signing and selling my book.
All right, I just want to make sure people get that. April 28th and 29th from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Citi Field, where the New York Mets play, and they're playing very well. So this is in Flushing, Queens.
Yeah.
It's the website is The World's Fair, FARE.NYC. You can buy tickets. Apparently, those tickets range anywhere from $19 to $199. But the point is that there is some heavy hitting food from over 100 or so chefs. And I'll tell you, if I were here, I would be there. And do me one favor, by the way. I send my kind of regards to Liza DeGia, because even though I haven't met her in person, I have a little bit of a crush on Liza DeGia, who I know is also one of the curators at your event. Joe, in the 3 minutes that they'll give us here, your book, 111 Places, tell people about it, brief, and then also where they can find it and where they can find you.
Sure. So, first of all, it is not a food book. I was discouraged I was told to limit the amount of food in it. I'm very happy for the places that made it in. There's everything in here from the birthplace of punk rock, where the Ramones used to hang out, to the birthplace of our current president in Jamaica, Queens,
right,
to the oldest tavern in New York City. All sorts of stuff. There's even a velodrome if you want to go watch bike racing, and you can find it on Amazon.
Right.
More importantly, if you want to support local businesses, you can find it at Book Culture in Long Island City, the Astoria Bookshop in Astoria, and you can find it at Q and Willow Books not far from Danny's House of Pizza, which, oh my God, I forgot to say to you, I love Danny's House of Pizza, although I have to say my favorite is the pesto slice.
Okay.
I eat the regular slice, but it stews really sweet for me.
It is. They will advertise themselves as the sweetest sauce in Kew Gardens. So it's what I grew up on. They didn't have pesto in those days, Joe. I want to tell people, by the way, before they kick me off, us off in 2 minutes, that your book is called 111. Let me just make sure that I get that right. It's called 111 Places in Queens That You Must Not Miss, and you can find it in all the places Joe mentioned. You can find Joe at Chopsticks and Marrow online, and also Joe DiStefano. I could find you if I wanted to on Twitter or Instagram. So I just want to say thank you for being here with me. I love having guests, particularly one with your expertise and knowledge of that part of the world. And ladies and gentlemen, I must say goodbye within 30 seconds here, episode number 9, All You Can Eat, back next Wednesday. And we got more guests coming. We've got Veronica Chambers, author of 31 books, including 5 New York Times bestseller. And Coleman Andrews coming up in a couple of weeks as well. Maybe one of the great food authorities in America, founding editor of Savor and editorial director of the Daily Meal. Wednesday nights, 8 p.m., All You Can Eat. I'm Rob Rosenthal, author of the How to Cook Book Short Order Dare. If you're in the mood to buy another book, entering by 111 Places from Joe in Queens, Short Order Dare, available anywhere that you can buy books. And I know I shipped out a couple today from a friend who asked for them, my friend Deskia, and they're heavy. But they're heavy, but they're delicious.